Hello, welcome to Touchdown Nerdcast, starring Jordan, Frank, and Andrew.
Minus Frank tonight.
Minus Frank, maybe he'll join.
It's a sad day.
We should have a new segment where Frank listens to what we have to say, and then he comments on the next episode about all the things he disagrees with.
I liked it.
It is September 19th. I have a head cold, so I'm all stuffed up. And I just had my second child a week ago.
Congratulations. Do you have a head cold? Are you running a fever? Because you look a little hot right now, Andy.
Thank you.
Look a little sexy. Eating that ice cream.
Thank you. I'm using the ice cream to cool down.
You know who else looks sexy is some Puka Nakua.
He does look sexy.
You have him in one of your leagues, don't you?
I do. You know, I think he was worth the week one fantasy budget.
What'd you spend on him? Like $33?
$33.
I wonder what the next highest bid. Does it show you what the next highest bid was?
I don't know. I've never really been curious. I don't think it does.
I'm actually kind of glad that I have my FOB money this week to spend on Jerome Ford, because I tried to take Joshua Kelly last week when I knew Eckler was out, but I didn't realize I had to put a price on it, so I lost. And now I'm really glad I didn't spend $45 on him.
Oh, yeah. I thought about that, too. When I picked up Puka, I was like, do I want to pick up Kyren and Puka both on one team? Not really sure how good the Rams truly were after 1 week. And I think I thought about, I think I put in an offer for Josh Kelly too, but it was too low. I just didn't want to risk it on what those teams were.
I think the tough part for me with Joshua Kelly, like now that I look back to it, was I'm glad I didn't put any money on him, because he could be just a 1 week, 2 week filler, if that. Like Eckler's most likely has a chance to suit up this week, and if he doesn't, then he's probably back the week after that. So like knowing how your FOB money works now, like when I take an injury like Chubb, where it's a season-long injury, makes more sense to have all my budget to try to blow on him, just to make sure I have a guy that's going to replace somebody who's missing the entire season, rather than trying to win 1 week by picking up Kelly and then not having money to get a guy that's going to help me the rest of the way.
Exactly. Like Eckler's not been ruled out, whereas there is no one in front of Jerome Ford right now.
No, I kind of thought, honestly, that they might be picking up Kareem Hunt because he's still not signed anywhere.
They definitely could. And that was part of my thinking with Kyren Williams was, I think when the waiver wire cleared for that, Cam Akers hadn't been cut yet. Like, you didn't know what was going to happen with the Rams backfield. And then after waivers cleared, the news came out that, he's not cut. He's inactive. He's placed it inactive. So every team has a roster of 53 plus one. The plus one is a QB. And on game day, I believe they can have 46 active, like dressed, ready to play. So we didn't know that Cam Akers was going to be inactive yet. So, but if you're in a league where Kyren Williams wasn't picked up, or and Jerome Ford is also in the waiver, I'd be spending a lot to get him. I'd be using my first waiver to get starting quality running backs post draft. Like, those are just few and far between.
Yeah.
There might be one or two more through the rest of the season, because injuries are going to happen. But
Kyren
what you
Williams
know now.
Was Kyren Williams drafted in your league, or was he free agent picked up after the first week? I didn't pay that much attention to the free agent wire when I missed on Joshua Kelly. Was he on a team already, or did somebody pay for him?
Are we referring to the league that you and I are in?
Yes, your league.
He is a free agent and no one drafted him.
And he got picked up last week, or he's eligible to be picked up this week?
He got picked up last week.
Okay. Do you know what he went for money-wise? Was he in the 40s?
We can find that out.
I thought I saw somebody go for like 45 or something like that.
Yeah. Fab offers. Oh, you can see the lower ones. Yeah, recent transactions. You can see fab offers and what the next highest was. So Kyren Williams went for 26.
Damn, that's a steal.
And the next, oh yeah, for sure. Knowing what we again, Cam Akers wasn't inactive until after waivers cleared.
Correct.
So I think it was an appropriate amount of money to spend when knowing what we knew last week, and now that Cam Akers looks like he's not going to play, it's a steal. Because somebody would be dumping $80 to $100 on him in Fab this week if he was still available. Josh Kelly went for $9 last week.
Yeah, that's not a bad price. Like, I would have paid that, but ultimately this week now with Jerome Ford taking over for Chubb and me needing to have a chance to get him, that $91 versus anyone with $100 makes it better that I have the $100 to put on.
Yeah. And like we said, he has no one in front of him right now.
No.
And again, the news could change. You know, you could process waivers tomorrow morning and at the same time find out that the Browns just signed Kareem Hunt, and you might have wasted some money, but
correct.
You don't know.
At the end of the day, he's going to be used to some degree. If I spend $100 on a guy that's going to split 50-50, then it is what it is. Like, at this point now, you're lucky if you find a running back in free agency that's going to split 50-50.
Mm-hmm. And got a lot of carries week 1 with Chubb healthy.
He did. And he seems like a good passing down back too. Mm-hmm. I know Chubb was supposed to take on that role because he's actually a good pass catcher too. But I think that's a nice thing to have if you're Cleveland. You go from having that really bad vibe and feel after seeing what happened to Chubb, with him just being kind of the face of that franchise and really seeming like he's a real like team fan favorite, to come back from that knowing you have a guy that's been in the system, stepped in and was successful in a close, tough matchup against a division rivalry. I mean, I think you got to feel okay about, it sucks to lose Chubb when he's a top 5 running back in the league, but at the same time, you come out of a tough spot not feeling like your season's done. I think there's a lot of teams right now with what you're seeing early in the football season that they're one injury away from that being their season. I mean, if that's Saquon Barkley, and I get he's going to miss 3 to 4 weeks probably with his ankle sprain, if he's Chubb in this situation, they're done. I mean, they might be done as is, but they're done. I mean, Matt Breida is not looking like what Jerome Ford looked like when he stepped in.
That Giants offense is just, I think it'll just be like a week to week who gets the ball. Their tight end is probably the only consistent one.
Yeah.
And you are the owner of Nick Chubb.
Yep, unfortunately.
Our league. The 2 yoked league. So you're navigating some deep waters right now.
Yeah, I think the lucky thing, and now I really look back to like one of our first podcasts talking about our strategy for how to draft in your keeper auction league, that it really says a lot now that it reinforces me not blowing all my money on a Bijan Robinson and trying to stack 3 running backs, which ultimately now would be sitting there with 2 running backs, which obviously having Bijan would still be very good, but I would not have had any depth on this team. And I think when you lose a guy like Chubb's status and a guy that's banged up right now in Eckler and a guy that's underperforming in Dameon Pierce, the depth right now is the reason why I'm still possibly a contender, even after losing a guy that would have been a top pick in the draft and Chubb. I think if I had blown all my money on Bijan, my team's done. It wouldn't matter if Eckler comes back this week and I had Bijan. I wouldn't have what I have the rest of my team. And ultimately, those two guys aren't going to carry me through the rest of the fantasy football season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you pick up Zach Moss in free agency too?
I did.
That was a good ad. But I mean, I think he's also like the first one maybe you would bench if you pick up Jerome Ford.
Yeah, honestly, right now I'm probably benching Dameon Pierce. I mean, that's what killed me with the Chubb injury is that until that offensive line can figure out how to block anybody, I mean, they have 3 injuries on that Houston Texans line. That line was not good at the beginning to start anyways, and to lose 3 starters.
Yep. Dameon Pierce is going to be struggling.
He's gonna in the game flow. Like I knew that was the risk when he came in to me was game flow. Like I just liked him more because he's young, he's flashy, like he's got some skill ability.
Skill ability. I like that.
He's not like to me, he's not like Alexander Madison. Like Madison's in a better system because the offense is just better. They're going to be in games more often than Houston is. But again, too many mouths to feed. And the skill set for Madison, like he's not as good of an athlete. He doesn't have the same skill set. Like he's not flashy.
He's not as quick. Yeah.
I mean, I still think here, Dameon Pierce ain't doing any worse than Najee Harris. So like, to me, it's like, okay, I took a shot on Dameon Pierce. Well, the other guy I was going to spend that same money on in your draft was going to be like a Miles Sanders, and even Sanders hasn't done much yet in the first 2 weeks of the season. So I still think if Houston can figure out how to put some things together, I think Dameon Pierce could be good down the stretch or in these next coming weeks. I think CJ Stroud has looked really good going from week 1 to week 2. That offense, I think, with him is just going to get better. And if they can just stay in games, I think Pierce will be okay. It's just it's a little bit of pressure right now, feeling like I need Pierce to step up now just because of what happened with Eckler being out and Chubb now being done.
Let's hope that they can turn it around. I think he's going to get some goal line carries that he hasn't gotten yet. So,
yeah.
Yeah, 0 touchdowns through his first 2 games. He gets 1 touchdown in those first 2 games, and it's like a different story, and you're feeling okay.
Yeah. Now let's talk about since we talked a little bit about my running back situation with that. Your one league, that the league we're in, right, where you only have 2 running backs, but you get a boost in Jahmyr Gibbs now in that other league you're in, right? Because David Montgomery might miss 4 weeks.
Yep. That's what I want to see. I want to see my guy, Jahmyr Gibbs, get the opportunity to carry the load. I want him to be the first, second, and third opportunity. And hopefully they don't want to spell him with anybody else. It's just like any other fantasy player. It's like you want to see them get a full workload. And then it's always hard to be like, oh, like they just got like 2 great receivers on this team, or they got 2 running backs splitting it. And it is football. There's only 1 ball, and it can only go to 1 person on any given play. So I'm very excited to see Jahmyr Gibbs in this offense without Monty taking any carries from him.
Now, what has been, I know we've touched a little bit on how the season's gone so far. What's been like your biggest surprise in fantasy football? Take football aside, because I think one of my biggest surprises is some of these teams that have come out hot and haven't come out hot. But again, week 2-0 could turn into 4-13. 0-2 could turn into 13-4. And I think it's too early to kind of freak out or do anything. But like early fantasy football, like biggest surprise for you so far?
Biggest surprise for me might be it's tied between 2 things: how good Matthew Stafford looks, or how bad Justin Fields looks.
Uh,
Um, I don't know that anybody had confidence in Matthew Stafford going into this year, besides Cooper Cup. And when we all see Cooper Cup go down with a hamstring injury before the season even begins, we're like, well, the Rams are going nowhere fast. Like maybe they'll like pick it up in the second half. And Cooper Cup has absence has made absolutely no difference, which just blows my mind.
that blows my mind too. What blows my mind even more with that situation is ultimately the team that they had in their peak of their season last year with offensive weapons. Cup, Akers, neither one playing.
Yep,
Like you've replaced Akers with Williams, and two wide receivers have just stepped up in the presence of missing obviously their two best offensive players from last season with Akers and Cup, and they look better than they did at any point last year.
they do. They're 1-1 to start the season, but I thought there wasn't much to look forward to without Cup being on the field, and they look better without Cup on the field, and they look better without Akers on the field. And if I was them, I'd be like, why do we even need Cup? Like he's aging, like he's like good trade bait right now. Like
I think he's great trade bait, and he's also putting a little less pressure right now. Obviously, this hot streak, like Puka cannot average 17 targets a game for the remainder of the season. Like it's not feasible. It's like when you see early baseball season and everybody's like the guy's on pace for 120 home runs. Like, yeah, that's never going to happen. Like at the rate Puka's on, he will shatter every target record there is. He will set a new record for receptions. Like it just isn't sustainable. But at the same point, if it continues success wise offensively for that team with Kyron Williams, with Tutu Atwell, with Matthew Stafford, with Puka, I think it makes you feel really good if you're the Rams. If you can just sit there and possibly be sitting at 500 by week 6, you don't have to feel like you got to rush Cooper Cup back. Like
trade him.
ultimately using
I'm not talking
trade
just
bait.
trade him in fantasy. I'm like trade him in the real NFL. Like if you're looking to turn your, I mean, the Rams were not good last year, and if you want to get some depth and start rebuilding for the future, you could trade Cooper Cup for real and help get the Rams better foundation going forward.
Yeah.
Because it totally seems that Puka Nakua has entirely replaced Cooper Cup.
So what his
I also love their names, like
I like
Cooper Cup and Puka Nakua.
and then Tutu Atwell.
Tutu, yeah.
But I think what's your biggest surprise? Obviously, everyone knows Justin Fields is not doing well right now. Like, what's been the bigger surprise for you? Just more real football, how bad he's been, or the fact that he's not even fantasy number wise doing what? Like, he had bad games last year, but he made up for it, like fantasy wise, where you'd sit there and go, that was not a good game. The Bears got beat bad, but he still put up 20 plus fantasy points because he's running for 100 yards and a touchdown. I mean, I think it's got to be very worrisome that he had 2 yards rushing last game. I don't hear you anymore, Andy. I can't hear you anymore. Oh no.
Can you hear me?
Nothing.
Hello?
There we go.
Sorry about that.
Welcome back after some technical difficulties.
I wonder what's going on. It's the second time that's happened.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Did
Justin
you pause the
Fields.
stream? Justin Fields.
Yeah, I put it on the will be right back, but I'll have to do some
So
post editing.
more surprised with how bad he's been in real game, or the like his fantasy wise projections and production. I don't know. I mean,
He hasn't been a disaster fantasy wise. I don't think he's been a disaster in real life. It's just the look of it is not what we expected to see from him in that offense.
do you know how many rushing yards he had last game?
3.
Yeah.
So that's what's surprising. He is not rushing the ball on like designed runs or like designed rollouts at all. The Bears offense is throwing a million screens for whatever reason. I don't know why. And sometimes he's making throws that are just like on point, perfect throws. So it's not like the mechanics are like always bad. It's more like he doesn't see the field well. Most of the commentary or expert opinions on him are usually like he just doesn't see the guy come open, or he doesn't throw an anticipatory pass. He's currently guarded, but in a half a second later he's going to come open.
He has zero feel and confidence for trusting what the route run is. And I think the biggest thing to me, I had this conversation with somebody else that had brought up a very valid point. He was actually a big Justin Fields like advocate. And I wanted Justin Fields to be the guy. Every Bears fan, I think, wanted Justin Fields to be the guy. You remember what the biggest critique on him was in college football before he got drafted?
Too long. Is that it? Just took too long to throw the ball?
He had the most yards of separation per pass completion of any quarterback in college football. Yeah. I think on average, he had like 6 to 8 yards of separation between his receiver and the next closest defender. And now you're in a league where you need 1 yard of separation to throw a guy open.
Yep.
I wanted to not believe it because of his athletic ability and his arm talent. But at the end of the day, you go back and watch film on Justin Fields from college, a lot of his broken play, long passes that resulted in completions or big plays, he was not hitting receivers in stride. They were open, and he had a bunch of receivers who now play in the NFL who made everything happen after they caught the ball. And you're just not going to see that in the NFL right now at all. And I think that should be very worrisome outside of fantasy owners who drafted Justin Fields. Where I thought about drafting Justin Fields is just being a Bears fan, that I don't know that he's ever going to get past that. I mean, he holds the ball so long. It's unbelievable to watch.
Right. Maybe he would hold it less, a shorter period if his receivers were 6 yards wide open.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem, is he's waiting for him to be 6 yards wide open, and then they are for a brief second, but by the time he looks to him, that gap has closed because everything moves that much faster in the NFL versus in college football.
Yeah. And here's the thing is, I don't think that he needs to be a perfect pocket passer and anticipatory thrower. I think he needs to be better. But why aren't they using his skill set to roll him out and design runs and QB options, RPOs? Like, they're just not doing it at all.
Yeah.
And I do think that there has been some discussion between him and the coaching staff to like they're overemphasizing the pocket pass now. I think that he wants to be that first QB in Bears history to throw for 4,000 yards, and they want him to succeed as a pocket passer. But it's like they've gone too far the opposite direction. Because I don't know why
Well,
you throw like 10 screens a game. Like,
I think it's the problem that I've had with the coaching staff. And again, the coaching staff is to blame, obviously. But I think like I'm done at this point and hopefully it changes, but just watching what I've watched so far, I can't put all the blame on the coaching staff. It now falls on Justin Fields. Before I wanted it to be coaching staff and not to put that weight on Fields. But I think now it's definitely a combination of both. I think that a perfect example of it is look at Lamar Jackson. The last 2 seasons, they have tried to take away the fact that they're trying to, whether it's to keep him healthy and protect him, or so he can develop to that next degree of seeing if he can be a pocket passer. They have not been the prolific offense they've had in the past, even with the same type of personnel, since they went away from designing plays that played to Lamar Jackson's skill set. And I think the Bears, when they let Fields do that last year, their offense, sadly, last year looked better than their offense looks so far through 2 weeks.
yeah. And I think it is too soon to like say that this is the end all be all, but it doesn't look good. Um, I mean, Joe Burrow has started off 0-2 and been bad and taken his team to the playoffs. Right now, the Bears' offense has scored as much points as the Kansas City Chiefs' offense. Like, there's potential, but it's not like the eye test is not working. Passing, it's
So
it
here's
looks bad.
here's the dead giveaway. Obviously, if you take away resume of what these guys have done, because it's not close between Burrow and Fields, like everyone knows Burrow is a far better quarterback than Justin Fields right now. I think the biggest thing is, even though maybe it's not too late, or maybe people want a little bit more time, or maybe it's too soon to throw in the towel on Fields. If you're the Bears GM right now versus the Bengals GM, if both teams finished with the first and second pick, or both teams went 0-17, even if the Bengals somehow went 0-17, which they won't, they're not even considering drafting a quarterback first overall. If you're the GM for the Bears, is there any chance you hold Justin Fields and don't take a quarterback with the first overall pick? Is there any chance?
No.
As of right now, with what you've seen?
No. Justin Fields needs to look like a top 10 QB. And if he's anything less than a top 10 QB, then you can't convince me that drafting a quarterback wouldn't be a good option for your franchise. And then, I mean, there's some other things to note that, like, he hasn't been just horrible. It hasn't looked good, but he hasn't been horrible. He's thrown for more yards than Brock Purdy, Daniel Jones, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Jordan Love, and everybody's like loving Jordan Love right now. Deshaun Watson, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jalen Hurts, Desmond Ridder, Joshua Dobbs, Joe Burrow. Like, he's thrown for more than all of those guys.
Okay, now, devil's advocate, how many of those quarterbacks would you not take over Fields if you wanted to move forward as the Bears franchise? How many of those guys that Justin Fields on paper is out throwing right now, how many of them would you not take over Fields? You named probably like 13 guys?
I don't truly know that Brock Purdy is better than him, so I would stick with Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields is as good as Daniel Jones. I think he's as good as Lamar Jackson. Right now, Dak Prescott and Jordan Love, I think, are playing the QB position better than him, not making mistakes. I would keep Justin Fields over Deshaun Watson. I would keep him over Jimmy Garoppolo. Jalen Hurts is playing better football than Justin Fields. Joe Burrow is playing better football than Justin Fields, barely. But like you said, I have a lot more confidence because Joe Burrow's taken his team to the playoffs and won big games.
I think the sad part to me out of the list of guys that you named is outside of maybe Jimmy Garoppolo. I think Joshua Dobbs is the only guy that I want to take over Fields. And I was a big Fields hoper this year. I just think there's a lot of issues with what he can't process up here that it doesn't make up for the talent he has. That's not going to override it, but let's hope that I'm wrong on that.
If he had thrown 2 less pick sixes, the Bears as a whole, the games would have been competitive. The team overall would have looked like it's more in those games, but he's thrown 2 pick sixes. And then you add in that those take away from his fantasy value. He actually moves up fantasy lists. So he's just, it's not looked good in 2 games, but the potential is there for him to be better. And it has to start this week. You can't go 0-3 in the NFL and not pay some consequences. Losing 3 games in a row, which the Bears probably will do.
I was going to say, how confident are you they're going to snap their 2-game skid against the
Chiefs,
the Kansas City Chiefs?
Not confident. So, I feel like everybody in that organization has to be looking at each other and being like, we're going to change how we call plays. We're going to change. You know what? If he's just going to be a 1-read QB, fine.
Yep.
Design
the playbook to work for him, or try to work for him. I mean,
there's nothing wrong with that.
To me, if you're the coaching staff, you have nothing to lose. I'm designing a playbook that it's 100% going to be my quarterback's fault if he can't be successful with it. They are going to lose my job.
They're going to lose their job if they continue playing Fields this way.
Yeah.
They better change how they're approaching game plans. I'm sorry, you're not going to be a pocket passer. You're not going to reach 4,000 yards. But you know what we could do is play offense good enough to win a game.
Yeah. I think obviously what started this whole conversation on the Fields and who'd you say Fields and Stafford thing. I think my biggest surprise in fantasy football this year is Jamar Chase and quarterbacks as a whole not putting up, the big name quarterbacks, not putting up the elite level fantasy points for the first 2 weeks of the season. I think it's absolutely shocking to me that Jamar Chase has been not even startable. I mean, there's 45 receivers that have scored more points than him at least. I know a lot of that falls on the quarterback play. That's been absolutely, if you would have told me that he was going to have 9 catches for 67 yards or whatever he has through 2
10
games.
10 for 70.
I would have said that there's no way. 10 for 70 would be a bad week for him. And let alone that's 2 weeks into the season. I'll be interested to see. I mean, Joe Burrow can't stay as bad as he's been. That offense is too good to continue on that streak. I think quarterbacks, this was the big year we talked earlier in podcast about not reaching for a high level quarterback. In my one league, Patrick Mahomes, and our quarterbacks are weighted a little bit heavier because they do get 6 points for passing touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes went in as the 12th pick overall in that league, and he has not outproduced in 2 weeks. Daniel Jones outscored him this past week, and 2 outscored him in week 1. Those are 2 guys that are either drafted at the end of the draft as a second quarterback option or guys that were in your free agency to start the season. Jalen Hurts has not been Jalen Hurts. Obviously, his 3 rushing touchdowns help his fantasy points, but he's not putting up what he was putting up last year. Joe Burrow has nowhere come close to what you would have drafted him for. Josh Allen, week 1, was absolutely not what you drafted him for. Justin Fields was supposed to be top 5. I had him as a top 5 quarterback finisher, and I don't know. It's just you're seeing a lot of these big name quarterbacks that were reached for in drafts this year. Even Justin Herbert, I have him in your league. He had a good week this past week, but I didn't pay the money I paid for him to put up what he put up. I'm having him there to have huge weeks and help win me weeks. And I think it's shocking, like a guy like Jared Goff. You have Jared Goff. I love him, especially when he plays at home.
Yep.
But that guy went undrafted or back end of the rounds as a second quarterback option. Like Kirk Cousins is one of the highest scoring guys.
You're right. In my other league, I drafted Jared Goff as like the 18th quarterback off the board, and he's my starting quarterback, and he's won me weeks.
Yep.
Yeah, and then Mahomes and Herbert aren't playing horrible, but they're not coming in, with big time performances that win you weeks yet.
I mean, think about if you had a league where your team could honestly
you're expecting those guys to score you like 30 points a week, and they're at like
100%.
5 points a week. Yeah.
But imagine if your first 3 rounds of your draft went Eckler, Chubb, and like Justin Fields in like the 3rd or 4th round, and you're sitting there going, I lost the one, the other one's banged up, and my quarterback's not doing anything. Like,
yep. I'm sure there's some terrible rosters out there that are just experiencing the worst luck. I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, Justin Fields is not being like Justin Fields, Justin Herbert were pretty much going like 7, 8, 8, 9, where with like Trevor Lawrence. Justin Fields has more fantasy points than Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence, Dak Prescott. Like, that's crazy. Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think it's been crazy.
He's only like a touchdown away from, Jalen Hurts, or 2 interceptions less away from Jalen Hurts.
Sam Howell's the top 10 quarterback fantasy-wise right now.
Yep. Sam Howell, Baker Mayfield, Mac Jones. Like Baker Mayfield, Mac Jones, like nobody wanted them.
Yeah, those guys are in your free agency still. Like,
yeah. It's unreal.
I think it's just it's a tough year for quarterbacks. I was glad to stay away from stacking running backs because so far it has been a tough year for running backs unless you have Christian McCaffrey or maybe Tony Pollard. I mean, even Pollard had a down week for what you would expect him to do and drafted him for. I mean, Christian McCaffrey in 2 weeks has been the Christian McCaffrey everybody drafted him for. Austin Eckler had a first good week, but then he's hurt. I mean, Saquon Barkley could have a big year, but he got hurt. I mean, Derrick Henry, they're obviously not going to pound him with the workload they have in the past. I don't know. There hasn't been a ton of flashy running back play yet. And I think quarterbacks are so hit or miss right now that it's like you better have loaded up on tight ends and wide receivers, especially in my league where it's a full point PPR. I am so glad I took heavy on tight end and wide receiver because that's the only reason I think I'm going to be a contender this year in that league. I think it helps in your league too that I got guys like Nico Collins and a Romeo Dobbs and a Cortland Sutton who have been fairly productive in 2 weeks, and they were guys that I was hoping to not have to use besides bye weeks. And now with the injuries and lack of production from Dameon Pierce, I'm going to probably start him.
I love this in our league that Raheem Mostert, we were like, nah, like he can't be good. Like, and he's been great, I mean, not necessarily great, but better than everybody else out there. He's currently fourth in our keeper league. It blows my mind.
To me, he has the skill and athleticism and flash. I mean, he was a 4.3 40 guy. He's a big athletic back. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy.
Yep.
I mean, he's got all the tools, but.
Yep. And on that offense, with defenses paying attention to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, he's in a good spot to have light boxes. I definitely would have drafted him if he was available. We were just kind of surprised that he was a keeper.
I was very surprised by that, but
go.
And I don't think I would have bid on him. I would have gotten him for cheap, but I'm sure if he was in a redraft, just like a Damian Pierce, Miles Sanders, he would have gone for in the $40-$50 range. Like, and I was never going to pay that for him. Like,
Raheem Mostert? No
yeah,
way. No way.
he would have been like one of the last running backs I would have bid on.
Yeah, no, he'd be $10 or less, or bottom of your snake draft. But he's doing great, so good for him. All right, you want to touch on the waiver wire?
Waiver wire for this week coming up, or waiver wire in general?
We can do both. There's the long term and the short term.
I think that
there's no bye weeks yet. Bye weeks start in week 5, I think.
I think bye weeks are going to be very interesting this year with what you're seeing already. I think bye weeks are something that you almost have to prepare for before they're there. Like taking shots on a guy like Roschon Johnson, who we've hated on, just taking any available back in some of these backfields where you're not seeing production out of the lead back or the three-headed monster, like, where you might run away with.
Chuba Hubbard has looked good.
Yeah,
Chuba Hubbard, whatever you say his name.
It's just one of those, like, obviously the waiver wire, Puka and Kyren Williams, and now Jerome Ford are going to be your biggest ads. I mean, Tutu Atwell is probably a good ad as well. Hunter Henry was probably one of the ads I would have credited at the beginning of the season because I didn't have him even in the mix of top 20 tight end, and he's been a top 7 tight end in the first couple weeks. But I think it's one of those that you just have to not be afraid to jump on a guy if you have the space or need for depth or a fill-in or an injury fill-in or a just getting ready for what's going to happen later in the season with bye weeks and possible injuries. You just got to jump on guys that fit a certain kind of make. Like, it's hard to spend that kind of money or part-time job on a Joshua Kelly where you know Eckler's going to come back. Like, he's a good handcuff to have, obviously, if Eckler stays out or gets hurt again. But like Puka, I mean, he's right now a top 3 wideout.
Yeah,
and it's
he's still available in your league. You need to go get him.
There's no way. And Kyren Williams, where are you going to find a guy that's now the started, like, clear cut starting back where they're not even giving carries to anyone else for the most part?
Yep. Those guys are available. You need to go get them. You need to blow your load on those guys.
And I think the worry is everybody like Puka, if Kupp comes back, well, if Puka's even half of what he's doing right now, he was worth the ad.
For sure.
I think you just have to you just can't sit back and wait till bye weeks or injuries happen. You have to load up on these guys so that when something happens, you already have that guy. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've looked into either of the leagues and been like, oh, this guy's like the guy I should, like, I'm paying attention to. Well, he's probably already owned now. Like, it's too late. So and come bye week, there's going to be nothing.
You can't wait to see what happens in fantasy. Most of these leagues are 13 weeks, like, 4 weeks shorter than the actual NFL season, and you can't wait to be getting points onto your roster.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how the waiver wire plays out. I mean, I think that most of the guys that everybody's talked about, like, they're going to be owned if they're not owned already. Yeah. So
I like your point with getting, like, a backup running back. I think Chuba Hubbard looks really good, and Miles Sanders hasn't been effective. I think Jaylen Warren looks really good, and Najee Harris hasn't been effective. I think Roschon Johnson has maybe not been really good, but he's been volume-wise used a lot, and Khalil Herbert hasn't looked that great this year. So those are 3 backup handcuff running backs I would take right now. And if Jerome Ford or Kyren Williams aren't already added, you have to go get those guys because those are starting quality running backs available in free agency.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, tight end's hard because you don't know. It's such a volatile position to predict anyways, but What's crazy right now is I have Kyle Pitts on my team, and he just sucks ass. And I can't be winning weeks when my tight end's getting 1 point. And so at tight end, I'm looking at Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz. The dude just won't go down. Zach Ertz has 18 targets through 2 weeks. He's not putting up a lot of yards or touchdowns, but it's more targets than Kyle Pitts is getting.
It's only going to be better when Kyler Murray, if he does come back in week 10 or whatever they're projecting for him.
Who's the other guy? Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill is, in most leagues, in our league, he's designated as a tight end. And if he's going to be getting 8 carries a game, or 8 touches a game, like that is excellent production out of a tight end player.
I think the hard part with him is he going to continue to get that kind of share of the carries with having, obviously Jamal Williams just got hurt. They like that Tony Jones guy that came in, but you get Kamara back in 2 weeks.
Right. But they've always used him. He's always put up numbers. I'm not saying he should be your main tight end, but if you need to have a bye week filler and you know that like my tight end's like the first bye week or whatever, you could stash him in week 3 knowing that you're going to use him for your bye week right away. Because he's better than a lot of other tight end options out there. I also think Chig Okonkwo had 0 points in week 1, rebounded with 4 for 4. So I think it's more game flow for Tennessee getting him the ball. So I don't think he's worthless. But those would be my 4 tight ends.
I think Tannehill just sucks.
Yeah, Tannehill's not the best. But we're talking about replacement level tight ends. So if you had to go for any tight ends, those would be the ones I would go for.
I think if somehow Sam Laporta was in your league, I like him a lot. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot of Jawan Johnson's there. I still think he's a decent filler. Outside of that, I mean, you might be looking at picking up a Jonnu Smith who's out targeting Kyle Pitts.
Yep.
So I think tight ends are just such a week-to-week matchup-based fantasy position, unless you're the Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, like the clear-cut number 1 guys that they're going to scheme open, is hit or miss. Like a David Njoku's probably going to have a game where he catches 8 balls for 80 yards and gets a touchdown because that was the week that they schemed him open because Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore were taken away. But I don't think there's really anybody outside the top 3 or 4 tight ends that are just target heavy first or second option on their team, which makes it a really hard position to predict.
That's what's crazy about Zach Ertz getting 9 targets a game. He hasn't done much with it, but
I think the loss of DeAndre Hopkins and not bringing anybody else in, you really just have Brown and him. I mean, Brown, him, and James Conner are really the only offensive weapons you have on that team with a backup quarterback.
Yeah, it's not pretty, but if it's where you have to go to get some fantasy production, I myself have Kyle Pitts, and it's been horrible, and I will be strongly considering adding a tight end to my roster just to get something, because it's just, you can't trust him.
Yeah,
it's like I feel like I'm more likely to get 0 than I am to get anything, like even 5 points.
Yeah.
All right, let's touch on wide receivers real quick. I'm gonna just drop a few of them that I think are maybe roster worthy. Wide receiver is a position of strength for me, so I won't be going for any of these guys. But
same with me.
Josh Reynolds, Tutu Atwell, Kendrick Bourne, and Jalen Reed. 4 guys.
I like those 4 too. I think you can throw in Tank Dell. He'd be one to watch. They seem to be going with a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, and CJ Stroud's going to have to throw the ball 60 times a game. I think I like Tank Dell over Jaden Reed. They're both the same position, both slot guys. I think that obviously he could still be chemistry, Jordan Love favorite, but I think you got Christian Watson coming back this week. I'll be interested to see what his numbers look like the next 2 to 3 weeks with Christian Watson back involved in the offense. Obviously missing Aaron Jones as well. Really only leaves Dobbs and Reed as the guys. And with Reed being the outside receiver, clearly he's drawing the number one corner typically. I think Reed's just been in a good matchup spot. But again, can't take away what he's done. I like Tutu Atwell a lot. I think he'd be the first guy that's going to phase away if Cooper Kupp comes back.
Yeah.
I
think you're exactly right. Tutu Atwell, when Cooper Kupp comes back, is going to be the first person to lose targets, lose volume. Jaden Reed is in an interesting situation where he seems like he's the third option, or maybe even like the fourth option if Aaron Jones is back healthy out of the backfield.
Yep.
So I like Tank Dell a little bit more as a target receiver, especially in PPR. Kendrick Bourne had a good week 1, a not so good week 2. And I still don't have faith in Mac Jones providing him with consistent fantasy floors.
I'm with you on that.
And then I think Josh Reynolds, if he continues to be like the number 2 wide receiver on a high octane Detroit offense, he's also worthwhile. Yep. But I kind of rank all these guys almost even. Like they could get you 8 to 10 points in a week, and if they happen to get a touchdown, you're getting to 17, but you're just hoping for touchdowns at that point.
Yep.
And so they're definitely flex to fill in.
Yeah.
Unless your roster's just real weak at wide receiver right now, and you have Jamar Chase as your best wide receiver. So you turned out pretty good on that end of the deal so far. Austin Eckler for Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
And Devonta Smith.
Devonta Smith's been a lot better, and Eckler is a top running back when he's healthy. So
yeah, it's a good thing you have Eckler and Chubb after losing Chubb.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's call it a day.
Okay.
Well, thank you for joining Touchdown Nerdcast. We look forward to speaking with you guys next time and getting Frank in here to correct us on all of our wrong opinions.
Yep.
We will talk to you later.
Adios.
Bye.